I'm joined now by Gary Cohen from Baltimore. He's Associate Dean of the Robert H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Elaine.
Now, as we heard in our story, Shanghai, the first free trade zone in China, opened a little more than 3 years ago, and there will soon be a total of 11. What does this show? What does it signal?
Well, I believe several things. First, for China, China's east coast was highly developed, but the central part of China, and particularly the western part of China, is a lesser developed area. So I think China's looking for more economic development in these underdeveloped areas. And these 7 new free trade zones, 3 of them are in the west, 2 of them are in the central region. And I think that that's actually also part of President Xi's plan for the One Belt, One Road initiative.
Well, that being said, how would they promote the development of that? Do you think that they would work hand in hand with another?
I do. I think this is a way for China to encourage foreign direct investment into these areas. It will also encourage integration with neighboring countries in Asia. A good example is when you look at the first 4 free trade zones that open. There's one in Guangdong, which is in the southern part of China. And the whole idea there was to increase integration between Pearl River Delta cities and Hong Kong and Macau, 2 administrative regions that are part of China. So that's just an example. Fujian's FTZ zone there, they've already got a known relationship and connectivity with Taiwan. By putting that free trade zone there, they can accelerate that activity. So I think we would see much of the same in these central and western free trade zones, encouraging foreign investment, but also increasing connectivity between neighboring countries.
Gary, I'd also like to get your reaction to U.S. President Donald Trump's newest executive orders on trade, the timing of it with President Xi Jinping's visit to the United States next week.
Well, I don't think it's a coincidence that he signed those orders today with President Xi coming next week. I think that was in his mind, a negotiating ploy. But it's really not a surprise to anyone because President Trump, throughout his campaign, had been talking about China's unfair trade practices, talking about anti-dumping. About 1/3 of the anti-dumping cases in the United States involve China. He talked a lot about anti-dumping in the steel industry with China supporting steel makers over there and, of course, dumping Chinese steel here, hurting American steel makers. So it's not a surprise. It's just, it was to be expected.
I want to get your take on something. Just after the release of those executive orders, the president and CEO of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce released a statement saying that trade deficits are not an indicator of the overall health of the economy. Would you agree with that?
Well, I do. I do agree with that. And I think a good example, and actually earlier in the broadcast, there was a talk about Apple and about the manufacturing overseas, and those iPhones are exported. But we have to realize a lot of money is also transferring to the United States. So you can't just look at the deficit by itself. Because with foreign direct investment, you do have financial transfers and incomes coming into this country, even though products are produced overseas. The other piece of that is producing overseas in many ways makes U.S. companies more competitive. And in doing so, they grow, not just in the United States, but also in China. So for example, Apple, I believe 25% of their growth has been due to China because of sales into China to the Chinese consumer. So I don't think we can just look at the deficit alone.
All right, we'll leave it there. Gary Cohen in Baltimore, thank you for joining us.